Do you ever wake up tired? I may have told you, I think I did. Years ago, I had a friend who was in his 80s at the time, maybe in his 90s. And one morning he told me, I dreamt all night long that I was working and I woke up tired. And maybe you're working even when you're sleeping, you wake up tired. Have you ever begun the day discouraged? You wake up tired, you begin discouraged. If you know that feeling, and I'm sure you do, you need to know what to do about it. Sometimes people know why they're discouraged. Sometimes people do not know. Sometimes maybe you don't know why you're tired or why you're discouraged. Some people have problems they can put a finger on. I broke my leg. That's a problem, and you may know how to fix it. Other times, maybe you're just of a worried bent of mind, and you're worrying. You're in anxiety. And there are times when perhaps the best answer is straighten up and fly right. Other times, though, sometimes we're doing what we know to be right, but perhaps there's some lingering anxiety, and I'd far rather take medicine for a broken leg than take medicine for a troubled mind. And so when someone says, well, it's all in your head, it may well be, but that doesn't mean it's not a problem. All these are problems, whether physical or emotional problems. They're all problems that we're going to address one way or the other. In Numbers 21, the context actually is kind of bookends. Verse 3 says, no, not verse 3, pardon me. Verse 4 says, and they journeyed, which is talking about the children of Israel. They were on a journey. In verse 10, the Bible says, and the children of Israel set forward. So between the point where they began the journey and they set forward again, there was this long period of delay. We mentioned yesterday that you can only go forward. You cannot go back in time. You can't go backward. You can only go forward. And so here they were, and they were halted. What halted them? Well, verse 4 tells us, and they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom. And the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way. So what discouraged them in this case? Well, the Bible just says because of the way. It was where they were going. Their whole way discouraged them. And maybe that's where you are. Just life right now is discouraging to you. And you don't know what to do. They were discouraged because of the way. By the way, a way that God was leading them in. They were going where God had directed them. Verse 5 says, and the people spake against God and against Moses, wherefore have ye brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth, it hates this light bread. He's talking about the manna that God had sent literally from heaven. So you've got a choice. You can talk about God or you can talk to God. Now what were they doing? They were talking about God, and not even directly. The Bible says they complained, is that the word? They spoke against God and against Moses. Do you think they shook their fist in the sky and said, God, what do you think you're doing? And then they complained to Moses? No. If this is like other instances we have of their complaining in the accounts of this wilderness wandering, they were complaining to Moses. Complaining is saying anything to anyone in a negative manner when the person to whom you speak can do nothing about it. So if I complain to you about the weather, I'm being negative about the weather. By definition, it's complaining because you can't change the weather. Now, God can, and I could talk to God about the weather, but I ought not come to God sniveling or with a bad attitude because He's the God of heaven. So instead of complaining to you, I should be talking to God. So at once they were kind of ignoring God. They were acting as if Moses had brought them out of Egypt. Moses had not done that. God had, and He'd done it through Moses. Moses wanted nothing less than to be involved with these people by way of leading them. He didn't want to do this. This wasn't ambition on his end. This was obedience. God's design and God's command for him to lead them out of Egypt. So on the one hand, they were leaving God out as if Moses is the one that had done all this. And on the other hand, they were speaking to Moses as if he could change something when he wasn't the one to change it. In short, they were complaining, but they were not praying. They were talking about God, so to speak, but they weren't talking to God. When they spoke against God, they probably did that by complaining to Moses. Now, what's the alternative to speaking against God or talking about God? The answer is just to talk to God. It's amazing to me in the Psalms in particular how direct the psalmist is. He doesn't pull any punches. Now, he's reverent and he is aware of the fact that God is God and we are not. But he's very straight up. He calls it complaint, and not in the sense that we just define it, but God, here's my complaint. God, here's my problem. God, I need you. God, I'm in trouble. The Psalms are full of problems and then prayer, and then because God is a prayer answering God, praise and gratitude. Some of us have nothing to thank God for because we've never asked God for anything to begin with, or God's given it to us, but we haven't been aware enough to know that God has actually responded to our prayer. So they were complaining against Moses. They were speaking against God, and they disdained the provision that God had given. It's almost as if the food straight from heaven, the manna, it's almost as if that was no big deal. They weren't even aware that it happened. You know, I am very aware of my problems today. When you wake up anxious and you don't remember exactly why, and then, oh yeah, that's why I'm anxious about today. You ever been there? You know, my problems grab me by the lapels and they shake me a few times and say, pay attention. The answers to prayer from yesterday, though, I can very easily forget those or rationalize them away. My problems are much more poignant to me sometimes than my blessings. But the bottom line is the same God that has given answers to prayer will give answers to prayer. So today, I don't know what your issue may be. I don't know why you may be discouraged or tired. They were weary just of the way. They were discouraged of the way. But you've got a choice. You have a choice. You can either complain, you can either talk about God by extension or directly, or you can talk to God. The psalmist did. God, I need help. God, please help me. And that gave the psalmist, and in many cases, many a reason to sing praise. It is interesting that later on, God provided water and said, gather the people together and I will give them water. And the Bible says in verse 17, then Israel sang this song. And that's the way it should be. We should be talking to God and thanking God. The song, just a 2-verse song, says, by the direction of the lawgiver, they found water. Direction of the lawgiver. God is a lawgiver. God gives direction. And today you have a choice. If you're weary, if you're discouraged, if you're tired, if you're worried, you have a choice. You can either talk about God, you can either complain, or you can talk to God.